When I take a look at everything that is happening in America today, it's a lot to process. Sometimes you turn on the news and you read a headline and you just think to yourself, what? Like, what are we even talking about anymore? Like, when were bathroom signs an issue, right? Like, suddenly you got people that are seriously marching in the streets over bathroom signs. You've got policies in Los Angeles, which is the only communist country I've ever been to. Policies in Los Angeles where they are fighting to make sure, successfully, that when you walk into a Target or when you walk into any other store, there's no longer men and female sections or boy and girl sections. They want everything to be gender neutral. And that seems like a really, really ridiculous fight in terms of everything that's going on. You really think to yourselves, were there that many people in the country that were saddened by seeing men and women on signs, that we had to make this a political movement, that we had to put this at the forefront of everything that was going on, despite all of the issues that we have going on? So you see that battle and you go, oh my gosh, what does that even mean? And then you look over here, and that's one fire. I mean, you look over here, and then you've got the climate change religion, and you've got people, children that are walking out of school, right, to protest climate change, and you've got Greta Thunberg, who is actually like 19, but looks like she's 7, who's taking a boat and saying, oh, I'm not going to be in school anymore, until this issue gets fixed. Like, climate is going to be fixed because you're on a ship and you're embarking to America. And you're wondering to yourself, they're saying the world's going to be over in 10 years, and the kids are hysterical, and they're rightfully hysterical because that's a scary thing to hear as a child, and they're learning this actively, and every single person in this room remembers whatever it was that was their fear climate campaign when they were in school. I was Generation Global Warming. We were showed a video of melting polar bears. Al Gore's video, Inconvenient Truth, was shown to us, and they said in 10 years, the whole world's gonna be underwater, and the polar bears, there's gonna be no more polar bears. And I had never even seen a polar bear, but I was suddenly very frightened for polar bears when I was in high school, very frightened, until I got a little older and I learned from other generations that they had different fear campaigns. Of course, the global warming thing didn't happen. The polar bears actually, since that time that I was in high school, the population of polar bears has increased, so they said, never mind, we're gonna call it climate change now. We're losing, actually. But before global warming scare, there was the global cooling scare. If you ask your parents or grandparents, this was a real thing. They told people that it was actually, the climate was cooling so much, and eventually the whole world was going to freeze over. So you had children that were terrified every winter, thinking like, this could be it, the world's going to freeze over. And then it didn't, because things started getting a little bit warmer. And then you had a generation, and some of you guys might have been in it, that had the acid rain scare. Personally, I think that one's the most traumatizing. Imagine every time it rains, you think there's going to be acid falling from the sky. This was actually a real thing. These people were shown things in school and believed that the oceans were going to become so acidic that the rain was going to be acid. So, you're okay if you're a kid in Arizona. It doesn't rain much, but the poor kids in Seattle must have been traumatized growing up. And then they kind of let go of that one. And so now they've landed, and they said, okay, we've been wrong enough times. The ozone layer was another one. We've been wrong enough times that we're just going to go with climate change. And we now have this very dedicated group of people that seem like they're in a religion for climate change. And I look around and I think, and I'm sure all of you think, what is that about? What is that fire alarm about? We've got the trans bathrooms, we've got the climate change, we've got the race issues. We're hearing so many different things that are happening. What do all of these crazy leftist pursuits, as I like to call them, what do they all have in common? What is it? Do you think that they're just being crazy and trying to burn down the world? No, it's Machiavellian. It's much smarter than that. There's a bigger plan going on when you look at all of these various issues that they're constantly stoking inside of this country. And what is at the nucleus of this is something that Black America, I always say, we were very much the lab mice for our government, right? We were the people that were tested, tried, and said, okay, this was successful. The deterioration of the Black family. Family is what is at the nucleus. And I always think when I see a government policy or a government freakout that's taking place, I say, what does this have to do with family? And then it all starts to lock into place, right? then you start to realize that the climate change lobby is currently telling children that it would be irresponsible for them to start families. In fact, they're giving out awards to people. Harry and Meghan recently received an award for agreeing to only have 2 children because the climate is a disaster and it would be irresponsible to have more children when the world's going to be over in 10 years, right? Why start a family? There's no point. And then you revisit those things like the trans agenda and the pick your gender and all of these bathroom signs, and you realize that these children that are making such crucial decisions and mutilating their own bodies will not be able to produce productive families in the past. You think about these race issues that have suddenly become so virulent, and you think about the Black Lives Matter movement, which had absolutely nothing to do with Black lives unless you include trying to end Black lives as an initiative. Then I would say Black Lives Matter has been tremendously successful. How many Black people died in the Black Lives Matter riots? How many Black neighborhoods were burned to the ground in the Black Lives Matter riots? How many Black people lost jobs because of their neighborhoods being burned down to the ground in the Black Lives Matter riots, which were sanctioned by the government? And then you visit that website and you say, well, what is Black Lives Matter about? Like, what is everyone giving billions of dollars to? And right there, just said it right on their page, you know, that they're Marxists, they're openly Marxists. They believe in the abolition of the family, right? That this idea of a nuclear family unit, a mom and a dad sitting at the table and talking to their children, that's backwards and it's wrong and it's racist, right? And that's always the magic word, racist, racist, racist. That is the tool and the mechanism for which they attempt to garner power. I mean, they're calling things racist that I have never even heard called racist before. I actually read an article and the headline was that air was racist, like oxygen was racist. I didn't bother to read the article because it was pointedly ridiculous. But as you're flipping through and you're seeing that they're calling more and more and more things racist, and you're flipping through and you're realizing that they're calling various other things racist and wrong and backwards and trying to use these fear mechanisms, understand that this is by design. This has always been the design of any group of people, any government that wants to seize full power over its people. The family must be absolved. The family must be ruined. And why I say that this movement that we started with Blexit and understanding that Black America needed to be awakened, understanding the history of what really took place in the 1960s, and understanding exactly what it was that Lyndon Baines Johnson accomplished with his Great Society Act, how genius it was, Machiavellian, it was genius. The very moment that Black Americans were given their freedoms with the Civil Rights Act, which he penned with a figurative gun to his head, right? He had to. It was a mess. There were riots happening. Okay, I'm going to do this. Then he said, but how are we going to keep them enslaved? This is a man who, for 20 years while he was in the Senate, voted against every single measure to give Black Americans any freedom. Then he magically becomes the president of the United States, and he's got to deal with this. And he says, what are we going to do to prevent these people from actually being free, even though I've had to sign this bill? Well, then came the Great Society Act. So much of what we need to learn from today. So much of what, if you really want to understand what's happening with these COVID policies and what they're looking for as they depress the middle class, as they shut down the mom and pop shops, right? As they say, oh, no, these are not essential businesses, but the corporations that we're in bed with, these are essential. We got to keep Walmart and Amazon open, but we can't keep mom and dad's coffee shop open. They've got to stay at home and save lives, right? Well, of course, that's the government garnering more power, and they garner more power when individuals need more from the government, right? When you have people that were going to work who didn't understand what was happening, who were suddenly told to stay at home to save lives. Well, what do you think happened after the Great Society Act when the government began knocking on doors, incentivizing Black women not to marry the father of their children? Well, the government will give you more money. We owe you for this horrible thing we did to you, you know? First there was slavery, then there were Jim Crow laws, and we, the government, now owe you for what we did to you, so what we're gonna do to you guys is we're gonna give you free money. That's what happened to Black America in the mid-1960s. That's what happened with the Great Society Act. The government came to help. And as Ronald Reagan said, you know, if the government ever says they're here to help, you better slam your door, right? You better slam your door. Governments are never, ever, ever trying to help you.